I'd like to call this meeting to order. We'll begin with an invocation by Pastor Jim Harp. Good morning.
Good morning, Jim.
Please join us.
Thank you for this privilege this morning. Let's pray. Father, we thank you so much. Thank you for this beautiful day that you've given us today, Lord. And we thank you for the privilege that we have to begin here with seeking your presence and your direction, God. We are so grateful for your many blessings in our lives. And Lord, you tell us in your word, you tell us in the book of Timothy, Lord, you say for us to pray, to bring intercessions for those who are in authority. Intercessions and thanksgiving be made for all people, for kings and all those in authority, that we may live peaceful and quiet lives in godliness and holiness. Lord, you've told us, not suggested, you've told us to pray for those that have been elected and placed in a position of leadership. And so, God, we thank you for these folks that have been put in this position. I pray for them this morning for peace. I pray for health. I pray for protection, Lord, and just your blessings upon them. Lord, we know the Lord's Prayer begins by saying basically that your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And so, Lord, that's my prayer often, for the kingdom of God to be built in our community, in our county, in our city. And the Apostle Paul kind of describes that later in one of his letters in Romans. He says that, for the kingdom of God is not eating and drinking, but righteousness and peace and joy in the Holy Spirit. Lord, that's what I want. I want to see righteousness and peace and joy in our community, Lord, that we would just experience that. So pray for the decisions and the directions that are being made, that, God, you will guide and direct and give wisdom as you've promised in your word. And I thank you once again for all your goodness to us in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance, which will be led by my favorite golf manager in the world, Mike Saunders.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, Mr. Saunders. Would you like to tell us a bit about your service?
Yes, I was in the United States Marine Corps from 2008 to 2012. I was a combat engineer, did 2 deployments to Afghanistan, and here I am working for Martin County now.
Thank you very much.
Boy, you boil that right down.
Yes, you did.
That's about the shortest version we've ever had.
Yes, that's
I
right.
went over to Afghanistan, I came back.
We have 3 presets today. At 9:05, we'll have public comment. At 10:30, we're going to have a Florida East Coast Railroad Quiet Zone update. At 5:05, or at the end of the meeting, we'll have public comment. Is there approval of the agenda?
Ms. Chair, I will move approval of the agenda.
Ms. Chair, I will second it.
There's a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. First up is employee recognition. We're going to be recognizing our employees of the year or something.
Yes, so the Employee of the Year Award recognizes 2 exceptional individuals who display outstanding performance and commitment. And the 2 awards, one is called the Spot On Award, and that's a peer-to-peer nomination that provides an opportunity for employees to recognize and celebrate each other's contribution and achievements while fostering positive and supportive culture. It's often members of the team that are our future leaders in the organization. And the Safety on the Spot, similarly, is a program that recognizes and rewards employees or teams for their commitment to maintaining a safe workplace, reducing accidents, and promoting a culture of safety throughout the organization. So the first award we're going to talk to is about the Spot On Employee of the Year is Keith Estrada. He's Chief Plant Operator for the Utilities and Solid Waste Department. Keith began his career with Martin County as a plant maintenance mechanic for utilities and solid waste. After nearly 10 years in that role, he sought a career growth and transitioned to the treatment Division as a wastewater operator trainee. In February 2024, he earned his wastewater treatment plant operator's license from the Florida Department of Environmental Protection. Keith actively pursues career advancement through training and by working to upgrade his operator license. In December 2024, he was promoted to Chief Plant Operator at the North Jensen Wastewater Treatment Plant. Keith was recognized for stepping into that leadership role during administrative changes at the North Water Treatment Plant. He took the initiative to identify and write procedures for the plant while offering support to his team whenever issues arose, all with humility and helpful attitude. His performance and behavior truly embody the qualities of an Employee of the Year. And I had the privilege of Sam and I going over to one of their meetings. Of course, they were wondering why I'm there.
As everyone would.
As everyone would, but it was a great surprise to Keith, and we had a great celebration when he first was nominated. So thank you, Keith Estrada.
Forward. Come on up, Keith.
We have several questions for you.
One of the big
We're
ones.
checking, all you got was a plaque. There, everybody go. Get a picture, then we'll get the mic. Yeah.
Got any film in the camera? No. Damn it.
Endure.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. First, I'd like to thank family, my wife,
Oh, that's smart.
from military. Then, thankfully, Martin County hired me as soon as I got out of the Army in 2012. It's been an awesome experience. It wasn't for them holding me down from there, and then meeting all the employees here with Pete, Brittany, Jay, Derek. They've all guided me through this transition from mechanic to operator. Awesome. They never let me fail. Taking all my tests, everything I needed for studying, any assistance I needed. If it wasn't at home, I got it at work, and I couldn't be any more thankful for Martin County. I really appreciate it.
Keith. So the next award is called the Safety on the Spot Employee of the Year, who's Jose Machado, Construction Project Inspector for the Public Works Department. Jose's journey with Martin County began in 2011 as an equipment operator in field operations. He demonstrating exceptional skills and dedication. He quickly rose through the ranks, ultimately serving as a field operations supervisor for 8 years. And of course, his skills on equipment is really unmatched, and I'm reticent to actually say it out loud here because I know contractors are watching. But he's always been eager to make a broader impact on county infrastructure. Jose transitioned to the Capital Projects Division. His professionalism, extensive construction knowledge, and diverse skill set have been invaluable in successful execution of the county's capital plan projects. Beyond his technical expertise, Jose's strong sense of community and genuine passion for helping others is commendable. His dedication to public service is evident both in his work ethic and character. Martin County Public Works is incredibly proud to have Jose as a valued member of our team, and we are honored to express our sincere gratitude to his unwavering commitment. This award is well-deserved recognition for his outstanding contributions to our community. Finally, Jose was recognized for his quick action ensuring the safety of a small child he found alone in the middle of the street running after a call while conducting a construction inspection. He spotted the child, immediately moved him to safety, and began searching for the parents. With the help from neighbors and the sheriff's office, the child was safely returned home. Jose remained humble, saying anyone would have done the same thing. And I know that, Jose has been one of those that I've had the privilege of I wouldn't say working alongside of him because they don't let me do equipment anymore, but Bathtub Beach washing away. He's out there while waves are splashing over equipment, rebuilding our infrastructure, and his skills as not only an operator, but he also had his own construction company for a long time. So he's a really exceptional member of our team, just as Keith. So again, thank you, Jose.
Thanks, Jose.
Thank you, everybody. I'm deeply touched that you all have chosen to recognize my actions with the Employee of the Year award. I truly feel that anyone else would have done the same if faced with the same situation. I was raised to help people whenever I can and to always do the right thing. I believe I was in the right place at the right time. I'm glad that I was able to help that little boy and to reunite him safely with his family. This award is a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can have a profound impact on the lives of others, and that we all have the power to make a difference in our community. Thank you to all that's always believed in me. Thank you for this wonderful honor. I am truly humbled and grateful to be a part of the Martin County family of employees. And one more thing before I go, I would like to thank Pam. May she rest in peace. I'm sure she had something to do with this. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
And to other counties, these gentlemen have contracts that take them through the end of their career here at Martin County, so don't try anything.
Our next act is to acknowledge the citizens who have participated in Class 66 of the Martin Cares program. Mr. Stokas.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Yes, I am George Stokas. I'm pleased to welcome some of the representatives of our most recent CARES class number 66, if you can believe that, 66 classes. Before I read their names and invite them up for a photo, I'd like to share a quick excerpt from an email that we received from one of our fellow classmates, just to give you a little idea of how this class affects them. It goes as, quote, "I've just completed the Martin Cares program, and I am writing to tell you what a wonderful experience it was. I thought I knew a decent amount about Martin County, but through this program, I learned so much more." That's from one of our students, Kara. Honestly, I can't pick a favorite part of the program. Each piece was interesting in its own right, and now I have a whole new appreciation for not only where our tax dollars go, but also the staff who work so hard making our county a wonderful place to live. And again, that's from Kara. And Commissioners, we frequently receive comments like this from our CARES participants, and I think it's a testament to the efforts of our staff and how they work and what they do for our community. So now I'd like to ask the following folks to come up so we can thank them for their participation in Martin Cares. And Commissioners, if you could come to the well to welcome them. And as the Commissioners come on down, what I'll do is I'll list the names. And if you could come off of my left through here, through the well, and the Commissioners will receive you.
Where's the music?
Where's the music? Dun, 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 dun. I'll get my kazoo for the next one. Stand by your name, yes. And now I'd like to ask the following folks to come up so we can thank them for their participation in Martin Cares. Miss Lynn Castro. And I apologize if I totally butchered the name. I'm going to try my best here. Miss Carrie Cottrell. Mr. Jim Latimer. Miss Deborah Marco, Miss Ellen Murphy, Mr. Richard Olson, Mr. Vincent Piazza, Mr. John Stamen, Mrs. Beverly Stamen, and Mr. James Vassi and Miss Rita Vassi.
Yeah.
Do you want a picture in the well? Okay. And for you graduates, we're going to ask you to stick around because we're going to want to take one picture of all of you in the well. It's the last thing you have to do for CARES. Yeah.
Scoot in. Be friendly. Yeah. You want Dana in?
Dana and you,
Yes.
In here.
great experience.
I'll be in the lobby. If you guys want to stay, that's fine. I'll be out here with them.
Thank you, yes. Thank you.
Next up are proclamations. The first proclamation is a proclamation recognizing 70 years serving Martin County's libraries in Martin County.
The ongoing, yes, we have, let's see, presenting a proclamation for 70 years. We have Sheila Leach, president of the Friends of the Martin County Library System. You can come on up. The ongoing work of the Friends of the Martin County Library System highlights the fact that our library system is the cornerstone of our county, providing opportunities for all to engage in the joy of lifelong learning and connect with the ideas of others from ages past to the present. The Friends of the Martin County Library System have been serving our libraries for 70 years, setting an example for all in how volunteerism leads to positive civic engagement and the betterment of our community. The board urges everyone to join the Friends and thank them for all they do to make our libraries and our community an exceptional place to live, learn, work, and retire. Ms. Leach?
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commissioners and guests. I'm Sheila Leach, President of the Friends of the Martin County Library Association, and I'm here to accept this proclamation on behalf of the Friends. As you just heard, the Friends have been supporting Martin County's library since 1955, and we were originally called the Martin County Library Association. In the 1990s, the Friends successfully appealed to the community for a 1% tax to pay for the cost of building additional libraries throughout the county. Subsequently, 6 Friends groups emerged, engaging in grassroots community support. In 2010, the Friends advocate for the library system's budget not to be severely cut when all the county budgets were being forced to tighten their belts. It was cut, but the library system survived and thrived. In 2012, the former 6 Friends groups merged, resulting in reducing expenses, maximizing our funding impact, and saving hours of staff time. In 2020, we survived and continued to thrive when some communities lost their Friends groups and support because of the pandemic. Although the Friends grant to the library system is a very small percentage of the library system's budget, approximately 1%, what we fund is clearly visible. We invite everyone in the community to join us on April 5th at the Blake Library between 2 and 4 p.m. to visit booths set up throughout the library system featuring what our grant funding provides. This family-friendly event will be generously arranged by Jen Solis's staff and Friends members. Once again, thank you for this gracious recognition.
Thank you. Bring the whole group up. Bring the whole group. No?
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
We're BFFs.
The next proclamation is a proclamation declaring Surveyors and Mappers Week in Martin County, Florida.
And we have Tom Walker, our county surveyor for Public Works, here to accept the proclamation. Surveyors and mappers are counted among the founding leaders of our country and were instrumental in the formation of the layout of property boundaries in the United States that provide our citizens the enjoyment of property ownership. In recognition of March 16 through the 22nd as Surveyors and Mappers Week, the board would like to acknowledge the men and women of this profession for their diligence in meeting the continuing needs in our communities. Tom?
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm accepting this proclamation on behalf of the Indian River chapter of the Florida Surveying and Mapping Society, the National Society of Professional Surveyors, and the National Association of County Surveyors. I want to take this moment to thank county surveying staff and our surveying consultants for the work that they do on county projects. They're most often the first boots on the ground, collecting data and creating maps and drawings for the projects, and their work often is unrecognized. So I want to just take this opportunity to recognize them for that. And also in the state of Florida, as far as at the time of 2024, there were approximately 2,400 licensed surveyors in the state. And 51% of those licensed surveyors are of the age of 61 or older. So we desperately need surveyors. So if you know anybody who is interested, parents with kids who want to learn more about professions and opportunities, any young adults, or anybody looking for a change in their career, please look at land surveying. It's a very good opportunity. I've been blessed to, in my career, to be a surveyor. We have a lot of neat opportunities as far as the tools and toys we get to use for our work. We have everything from planes and drones that collect LiDAR and are used for photogrammetry. We have robotic total stations that we use in the field, and we use boats for bathymetry, and so there's a lot of great opportunities in surveying, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Smart idea to say that. Bring the team up. George Washington was a mapper and surveyor.
I heard that recently, like half of the surveyors are over 60.
So our audience is getting ready.
We should have a best beard contest. We've got a lot of good beards this morning.
I was hoping not, but.
Some legitimate beards.
Yeah, and a lot of, you can't even get it with experience. Even with experience, you need the 4-year degree, don't you? Yeah, they might have to. Thanks, surveyors. Those,
Back out into the field.
loosen those.
He said there was people from the community.
And the room is cleared out now.
Yeah, right.
Nice job.
Our residents love seeing our surveyors in their neighborhoods because it means that a project is on its way. Next proclamation is a proclamation designating March 2025 as Irish American Heritage Month in Martin County, Florida.
This is a fantastic one, too. Right?
Top of the morning.
And we have Philip J. Morgan, our state treasurer, here to accept. And the Irish first came to Spanish La Florida, I think I said that in a French way, in the 1500s, first as missionaries and mercenary soldiers, and then as planters, traders, businessmen, doctors, and administrators. And 3 of the Spanish governors of La Florida were actually Irish military officers. Irish Americans, since America's inception, have provided leadership and service to Florida and to our nation. March is recognized as Irish American Heritage Month, and all are encouraged to celebrate their cultural heritage and many valuable contributions. Mr. Morgan?
Good morning. Esteemed County Commissioners, on behalf of the Ancient Order of Hibernians, the largest Irish American organization within our country, it is with great pride to receive this proclamation. Over 70 proclamations acknowledging Irish American culture within March have been declared throughout Florida. August of 2024 was an exciting time for being a Hibernian, being that we celebrated our national convention in Orlando within the great state of Florida. Locally, the Hibernians meet on the first Sunday of every month at the Saints Pub, which is at 2601 Morningside Boulevard in Port St. Lucie at 3 p.m. We thank the Board of Commissioners, along with our fellow citizens of Martin County. Go Irish!
Yeah.
Thank you. There you go. And our next proclamation is a proclamation designating March 3 through 9, 2025 as Flood Awareness Week in Martin County.
And we have Christine Madsen, Engineering Permit Manager with the Public Works Department here. Martin County has experienced severe weather in the past in the forms of extreme rainfall or tropical events resulting in flooding in both coastal and riverine areas. This flooding has caused damage and flood losses to homes and building in all areas, whether they are high-risk special flood hazard areas or low to moderate flood zones. Flood Awareness Week was recognized March 3 through the 9th, and the board encourages residents to increase their knowledge of how to protect themselves and their property in flooding.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Morning.
Last week, Martin County Public Works participated in Flood Awareness Week, joining a statewide effort to raise awareness about the importance of flood preparedness and the value of flood insurance. Flooding is one of the most common and expensive natural disasters in the United States. Just 1 inch of floodwater can cause up to $25,000 in damages. So we're encouraging our residents to become flood ready by preparing and understanding the risks of flooding in our community. We ask that our residents have an emergency plan and a disaster supply kit in case of an evacuation, and to obtain flood insurance to protect their homes and property. During Flood Awareness Week, we shared flood-related information through the county's social media pages and website, and we've also set up flood awareness displays here in the lobby, also at the Blake Library and at the building department. So we invite everyone to stop by and check them out. And thank you for helping us spread the word about this important issue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you. Now we will begin public comment. The first public speaker I have is Doug Farley, followed by Tom Pine. Good morning.
Morning.
One moment here. Later this morning, we will hear a report from Public Works about the viability of quiet zones at railroad intersections. You mentioned that earlier. I urge this commission to vote for quiet zones. Horns are ineffective. They do not work. Barricades, 4-quadrant gates, do work. You'll learn about these 4-quadrant gates when the Public Works makes their presentation. Motorists cannot simply drive around a gate if there are 4 gates, fully blocking the intersection. Quiet zones would bring a better quality of life without compromising safety. Often, politicians refer to leaders in public safety to help guide their decisions in matters like this. I want to read parts of a letter to TC Palm newspaper written in March of '24 by then Martin County Sheriff Snyder. The title, the headline of that news report said, by Sheriff Snyder, "Use caution in considering whether to create bright line quiet zones." He goes on to write, "Emergency responders often rely on the audible warning signals of trains to navigate through traffic and reach their destinations promptly. By eliminating the use of train horns, we risk impeding the efficiency of emergency services and potentially endangering lives in critical moments. Again, you know, when this is written, well, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going to go back here. I read this because the comments that the sheriff makes in the media has a lot of influence. People listen and assume he's correct, and he's not. Those statements are false. As a 31-year veteran in the fire service, many of those years driving emergency vehicles, I can tell you that at no time did I rely on a horn to warn me of a train. Personnel and rescue vehicles wear sound-impeding headsets to protect us from the siren and to allow us to communicate with each other and our dispatch. Police officers drive their squad cars with their windows up, the air conditioning on. Radio traffic between themselves, other officers, and dispatch mean they can barely hear outside the vehicle and must rely on visual references like gates. Civilian motorists are in a similar situation. Their windows are up, the air conditioning's on, the radio is playing or they're talking on the phone. They need a visual reference like gates. 4-quadrant gates, physical barriers work. Horns are ineffective. Please silence them so we can have a better quality of life. Again, quiet zones will not jeopardize public safety. And lastly, Boca Raton has had quiet zones since 2018. They've had no significant incidences at intersections, and I think you should follow suit. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Tom Pine is next, and Mr. Pine is the last request to speak form I have.
You have a dock cam light.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name's Tom Pine. I've been a resident of Martin County for over 50 years. If my photos could be left up while I speak this time, I would appreciate it. Today, this County Commission will approve $19,970,381.72 in expenditures between February 10th and February 23rd, using the consent agenda in a questionable manner without identifying the payees or the purpose of the payments. Secrets in our government spending habits is dangerous to democracy. How much did the clubhouse at our county golf course cost the taxpayers of Martin County? It's a secret. It was hidden in a consent agenda. Even a public records request about the cost of the clubhouse that cost me $35 and got back over 30 pages had nothing related to the cost of the clubhouse because it's a secret. These two photos from Sailfish Point, one from Sailfish Point in 2015, from the sand to the top of the seawall, about 11 feet. The second is from Bathtub Beach in 2025. From the sand to the top of the dune is about 9 feet. Less than a year since the last time our county government dumped millions and millions of our tax dollars to save, quote, Bathtub Beach. In reality, it's all about saving Sailfish Point from being an island of its own. We can never spend too much money to save some of the wealthiest among us. Everyone wonder where all the sand goes that we dump in Bathtub Beach? It has been suggested to me it flows north and smothers the reef just north of Bathtub Beach. On the other hand, our Assistant County Administrator, George Stokas, has promised several times over the past years he would be providing us with a plan to assist low-income families with help. Downtown Jensen Beach now has a paid parking lot with a gorilla in the room taking full advantage of the situation with $10 gift card to offset the $10 charge to park. What you permit, you promote. What you allow, you encourage. What you condone, you own. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address us? If not, we will move on, Commissioners, with your approval. If we can take up Department 1, which is Office of Management and Budget items. There are only 2 items, and Ms. Murley doesn't want to wait until the end of the day to bring up her 2 items. And after that will be John Mayle's agenda item, which is the board and committee appointments.
approve the.
Oh, yeah. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thanks.
We'll take commissioner comments after these.
Oh, sure. Well, let's have commissioner comments now, too. Commissioner Vargas.
Okay, there have been quite a few incidents at the rail crossings throughout our county. Jensen Beach being one of the unfortunate top areas where we have the highest incidents in our county. Hope Sound would be second. So I have spoken with staff. We're in planning right now to implement numerous safety measures to protect our citizens as they move about the county and be able to be rest assured that we are looking out for their benefit. So I want to make a mention of that. It's been spoken about in numerous meetings and let you know that we have our finger on the pulse of the community.
Commissioner Capps.
I'm good today.
Commissioner Campy.
Thank you. Just a brief announcement. This Saturday, March 15th, from 6 p.m. to 9 at the patio at the Palm City Place, which is on Map Road, just north of the Palm City Fire Station, we're going to have another installment of what we're calling the Patio Playlist. We're having Miss Carla Holbrook, who is a very well-known Martin County singer and performer, musician. She will be performing from 7 to 9. We'll have a couple of food trucks, some beverages, bring a chair or a blanket. We did it last month with a band called Vintage Radio. It was very well attended. Everyone loved it. We're trying to do it monthly, give an opportunity for neighbors and residents to come out and meet each other instead of just staying home watching Netflix and perusing their phones. Come outside, listen to live music, outdoors with your friends and neighbors this Saturday, March 15th from 6 to 9. Thank you very much.
Commissioner Heatherington.
I'm all set this morning, thank you.
Mr. Donaldson.
I'm all set, thank you.
Ms. Woods. Thank you. Then now we will begin with Ms. Murley's Department 1, right?
Did we approve the agenda itself?
Yeah, we did that at first.
Good morning, Commissioners. Stephanie Murley here with the OMB item today. We have 2 items. Our first item is permission to apply for the Florida Department of Transportation, FDOT, Local Road Safety Program grant for the Southeast Dixie Highway Signal Improvements Project. So Martin County is requesting to go out for permission to apply to construct safety improvements at 5 Florida East Coast FEC railroad grade crossings on Southeast Dixie Highway. The proposed improvements will vary, but they are designed to reduce crashes and improve pedestrian and vehicular safety. The requested grant award is for $3.2 million, which requires a $300,000 match that's going to be programmed within our roads capital improvement plan funds. And the second item is a permission to accept Amendment Number 1 of the Mosquito Control Agreement from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. It's a budget amendment to actually reduce the grant award by $6,185.56. This is due to the number of mosquito control programs that are participating in the Tier 2 funding category. This requires a match of 20%, which will also be reduced based on this budget resolution, and we just ask that you accept that amendment. And that's all I have today.
Questions for Ms. Murley?
Sorry, go ahead. I will move approval of the OMB items today.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Now we will move into B and C1, Environmental Lands Oversight Committee appointments. Mr. Houston.
Getting used to the suit, yeah.
I know, right?
Like a wonky bureaucrat.
I'm going to have to buy some new ones if I keep having to go up here. Michael Houston, Senior Project Manager, Martin County Environmental Resource Division. Hope you all are having a good day.
9:42.
It's 9:42. So today, we have just come back to you. At the last meeting, we basically approved the formation of the Environmental Lands Oversight Committee, and we have a slate of members that will fill the different roles on the advisory board committee, and we're hopeful that we will be able to get started and get the committee meeting within the next month or so.
Got some good ones.
Commissioner Campy.
Is this an action item?
Yeah.
I would make a motion to accept the nominees for this committee, having the opportunity to read each of their applications. Some of them included resumes. Even without, if you just, for a lot of us that have been involved in county goings-on for many years, that is a who's who list of some of the best and brightest and most involved members of our community. We couldn't have had a better inaugural group than the group that was put together. It's fantastic.
Mr. Vargas.
Yes, question, Dan Brady, is he a commercial broker or residential?
Residential.
Yeah, I just want to echo what Commissioner Campy said. This is a really impressive list of appointees.
And there's a tremendous amount of enthusiasm from all the members. They're all very thankful to be on the committee and are very excited and want to do their best to play their role in our selection process.
I'm confident that they will choose wisely, and I want to thank the committees or the organizations for choosing these fine representatives.
I agree, and I'll second the motion.
Any further comment? There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll now take up public hearing number 1, which is a legislative public hearing to consider adoption of the EAR report, Base Comprehensive Plan Amendment number 24-02, overall goals and definitions. Good morning.
Commissioners.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Clyde Doolin. With me is Jenna Nobby, Senior Planner. Before we start Chapter 2, I would like to just give you a brief introduction. This is a required amendment. This is a part of a process that is done every 7 years. The evaluation and appraisal report must be done as a requirement of Florida statutes. This process began in August of '23 with a community public outreach workshop, and an evaluation appraisal report was presented to the board in March of 2024. The board initiated the amendments at that point. The amendments have all gone off to Tallahassee for review. They are coming back now for adoption. This set of 7 public hearings that you'll have today will begin today, but are scheduled to conclude on March the 25th. So no final action is necessary today on these items. This, as I said, is part of a cycle that occurs every 7 years. These plan amendments are not changing the urban boundary, the 4-story height limit, or disregarding the protection of wildlife and wetland and natural habitat. These plan amendments do make changes required by Florida statutes, address local issues, acknowledging things like the Village of Indiantown being incorporated, and make basic housekeeping changes to keep the plan up to date. And I thank you very much for taking up these 7 hearings today. And with that, Ms. Nobby.
Good morning. My name is Jenna Nobby, Senior Planner with the Growth Management Department. And this is a request to consider adoption of CPA 24-02, a text amendment to Chapter 2, overall goals and definitions of the Comprehensive Growth Management Plan based upon the 2024 EAR. When this amendment was transmitted to the state of Florida, the State Land Planning Agency did not come back with any comments in their objections, recommendations, and comments report, also known as the ORC report. But a brief overview of what these proposed changes to Chapter 2 entail. We have proposed cross-references to Chapters 8, Coastal Management Element, and Chapter 9, Conservation and Open Space Element, to ensure that all the information between Chapters 2 and Chapters 8 and 9 are consistent with each other. There is a new objective proposed for addition, Objective 2.2F, and this objective is referencing resiliency planning, which is outlined in Chapter 8 Coastal Management Element. Policy 2.4C1 is proposed for revision to change the planning period timeframe from 15 to 20 years, consistent with Florida Statute Section 163.31775A. And in the staff report, as part of this agenda item, proposed changes number 8 through 17 all deal with the definitions contained in Chapter 2. There are some definitions proposed for revision based on changes in statute. Some definitions have been proposed for addition, and some have been proposed for deletion, consistent with the proposed changes in Chapter 1 Preamble and Chapter 4 Future Land Use Element. So that concludes staff's presentation on the proposed changes, and staff recommends that the board continue this public hearing to March 25th, 2025 at 9 a.m. or as soon after as the matter may be heard, and we are available for any questions you may have.
Questions for Ms. Nobby or Mr. Doolin? Commissioner Vargas.
We received a lot of communication about this. I'm certain you understand. I know what you said, Mr. Doolin. We are not moving the urban service boundary, correct? Four-story height is not changing. So are we strengthening or weakening our protection of Martin County? A lot of people have referred to Palm Beach County, St. Lucie County. We're going to look the same.
The answer, I think, is neither. We are making the necessary updates to comply with Florida statutes and address local issues, local changes, to acknowledge changes in the local circumstances here. But the plan is essentially remaining the strong protection that it has always been.
Yeah. So if we were to make a change, or if we were not to make a change, one would not conflict with the other. Is that what I'm understanding? Does that make sense to you?
I would say some changes that are proposed in Chapter 2 and within other chapters of the comp plan as part of the EAR process are required with statute. So we would need to make sure that any changes we're proposing are compliant with what the state is requiring.
So the state is requiring to make these changes that you're referring to. Is my understanding that it wasn't necessary? Is that correct, Ms. Elder?
So we are making some changes in compliance with Florida law, but the state came back with some, in the ORC report, they did make some suggestions to make additional changes. I don't think staff is making those changes, but we did make the necessary changes to comply with Florida law.
Okay, so a suggestion is a suggestion, it's not a mandate.
Correct. The ORC report did have some suggestions. I think one was maybe in Chapter 9 that we needed to provide for more water and sewer. We're doing what's necessary under the statute. We're not taking the extra steps further that were suggested. We're taking a conservative approach.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Capps.
On March 25, we're going to be voting on all 16 amendments.
That's correct.
And there's a group of them that have a relationship with each other.
Yes.
And depending on what we do in Chapter 4, that would have an influence on Chapter 1 and 2, and just a little bit of influence on Chapter 6, I believe.
That's correct. That's correct. There are definitions in this chapter that are shown stricken because the terms are removed from Chapter 4. So if there's any change in one, it needs to be reflected in all so that they're internally consistent.
Good. Thank you.
Any further questions? Is there a motion to continue this item?
I will move to continue this item to March 25th at 9 a.m. or as soon as possible after.
Second.
There's a motion and a second.
We need to call for public comment.
Sorry, is there any public comment? Seeing none. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
On to public hearing number 2, which is a legislative public hearing to consider adoption of EAR Amendment 24-08 Coastal Management Element.
Good morning again. Clyde Doolin for the record, and with me, Amy Eason, our engineer from the Public Works Department, who did a great deal of the work on Chapter 8, and we're very thankful for her assistance. There were no objections, recommendations, or comments from the state agencies on this chapter. It addressed a number of issues that are required in state statutes, such as resiliency planning. And I'll let Amy make any additional comments if she has some.
Thank you. Amy Eason, Environmental Resource Engineer. A lot of it was just housekeeping, updating the information containing our evacuation routes with hurricanes, being consistent with other studies, and for the most part, making sure that we clarified that the element that is in the state statute concerning the coastal element had been taken care of, as well as adding Goal 8.3, which addresses the peril of flood, Florida Statute 163.3178, very much like the statute in applying those vulnerability suggestions from our sea level rise report per Resolution 21-3.32. And just as a note, this, as he had mentioned, this is the EAR process. We're bringing things up to Florida statute. We are currently finalizing the vulnerability assessment right now, so there'll probably be another change to this element in the future when it comes to the suggestions in that new updated vulnerability assessment along with our adaptation plan that we're currently working on. If there's any other questions, let me know.
Questions for Dr. Eason? I have a couple. I'm on page 2 of 34 or 620. Shorelines need to be restored, managed, and maintained to minimize flood damage, reduce storm surge, stabilize the shore, and maintain adaptability to future sea level rise conditions. Does that include hardening?
No, it includes living shorelines, anything that we need to do to mitigate for sea level rise. So there'll be like a menu of items that will come up as we look at sea level rise and making sure that we're protecting infrastructure.
So if I have an unhardened shoreline, if I have a mangrove shoreline and it's damaged by a storm, what am I allowed to replace it with? And who evaluates what I can replace it with? And can I harden it?
So they will have to do, per what our code suggests, is they would have to provide an analysis kind of showing whether they can, whether they can't bring it back into vegetation or not. They would have to provide that analysis, and we would have to look at it and see if it complies with our code or not. So, I mean, I'm very strong opinion on it should go back as a living shoreline, but there may be conditions because of sea level rise. We may have to like raise some things, but that will be taken care of in our LDRs later on. But right now, you have the suggestion you could do it either way, but they would have to provide an engineer's analysis.
Commissioner, that's the same as the code today.
No, it's not. It's new.
I'm just saying that there are conditions where a storm damage or persistent erosion still has the same analysis for a property owner seeking to protect their property has to go through the same process after this amendment as they do today. It's all I'm suggesting, which is the natural shoreline is still party to it, depending upon what neighborhood you live in. The analysis may allow structures if, depending upon the situation, as it is approved today. Or the restrictions are the same, I should say. It's still a very different.
They're not in the comprehensive plan now. This is a proposal to add another qualifier into the comprehensive plan. You say it's already in the LDRs. I'll have to take your word for it because I don't have them in front of me. But this language is not in the comprehensive plan right now until we approve this amendment. I'm uncomfortable with that.
If I may, Commissioner, can you point to this?
Yeah, could you
The
please-
text that you were referring to?
You've got it on the screen.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, it's this one right here?
Yep. Also, on page 630, it's number 2, where preservation areas or shoreline protection areas are identified on a plat approved for single-family residential lots before April 1, 1982. Such lots may be developed in accordance with the standards for preservation or shoreline protection as described and dedicated for protection on the approved plat document. Were there any protections prior to 1982?
There were, it was interesting, if you go back and look at some of the old plats, you'll see some interesting language and some curious requirements put on those plats, and sometimes in the old PUDs, like the old Martin Downs PUD has some interesting preservation requirements and so on like that along Bessie Creek and in various places. And it's different in many respects than the language we see in the comp plan today.
So, were there any protections required pre-1982? Shoreline protection zones, did they exist?
Only from the state's perspective. I think it was in the mid-'70s when the wetlands rules went into the state of Florida in terms of dredge and fill. In terms of shoreline hardening, it would have only been to the restrictions by the Department of Environmental Protection, and I don't recall what codes the county had at the time, but there were a number of properties prior to 1982 that had bulkheads and canals built and things like that as part of their project. Today, they're able to maintain those in between have to follow the process of whether or not they qualify for shoreline hardening.
Good morning, if I may. Daryl DeLue, Environmental Administrator, Growth Management Department. So this language is in here to address plats that were approved before the comp plan was established in 1982. So we had commissioners like Maggie Hirschala at the time that required these subdivisions to establish preservation areas and shoreline protection areas in these plats. So they're basically vested on the plat based on what the board approved at the time. So we have plats from 78, 79, 80 that have these platted shoreline protection zones. Some of them have platted wetland areas. So we respect those things because they're vested per the plat.
Okay, so that was post-Maggie Hirschala, which would have been 78. What about before then? What kind of shoreline protection zones were platted?
Generally, the older plats don't speak to any shoreline protection requirements. They're just platted lots. But we do have these ones from like the late 70s that started to lock in a shoreline protection zone, and they can be 15 feet. They vary in size, and certain wetland areas that are also established on these plats from like 1980.
There are also, I might note, provisions in chapters 8 and 9 that do put protections on pre-82 lots of record. So even if something doesn't have a platted protection area on it, like, as I mentioned, the Martin Downs along Bessie Creek, there's still a requirement for having a shoreline protection zone of 25 feet on the old pre-82 lots of record.
Yeah, so if the plat doesn't speak to a shoreline requirement, they're considered to be lots of record prior to 82. So we do have code that establishes how you protect that shoreline on a lot of record. It's this weird, these weird plats that exist where the board did approve a shoreline protection area that's vested on the plat, so that's what we hold people to, is based on what the board approved in 79, 80, 81 before the comp plan.
It sounds to me like there's a conflict.
That's where I turn to my legal counsel.
Elise Elder, Deputy County Attorney. So I think the goal of staff is to put some more teeth in these plats because there are some applicants who might not want to comply with them. And sometimes the requirements are stricter than what the code provides for something pre-1982. So it's really just reinforcing that these plats that have preserve areas or shoreline preservation, that we are enforcing those, and that applicant it's in our comp plan that you have to comply with that. So I think that's the intention of it. I think for prior to 1982, that doesn't have it in the plat, we still have to follow our regular requirements. This is just putting additional protection for those Maggie Herchella instances that she actually put it in the plat or the board put it in the plat. So that's the goal with this provision. They still have to comply with everything else.
Also, replacement of existing structures within the shoreline protection zone shall not be subject to a 75-foot shoreline protection zone.
Do you have a page number,
Yep,
Commissioner?
same page, 630, number 5.
That's existing text.
I know. I don't know when the last time was that we changed it.
I don't think it has been. Do you remember having worked on a change on this?
No.
So what if it wasn't a legally permitted structure, for crying out loud? We're still going to let them replace it and it won't be subject to the shoreline protection zone? Because a lot of them are unpermitted.
Yeah, we address those when we can document that. The problem is you have some of these structures that date back to the, a seawall from the 60s, and all we can do is the best we can do with aerial evidence to show, but we're not going to find permits for some of these old structures that exist out there. That's just the reality of what we deal with some of these older areas.
I think the challenge is you have a home built in the 60s, they have a swimming pool within 5 feet of the seawall, and there's no way to enforce a 75-foot setback on an existing property in that condition. And that simply recognizes that.
Yeah, that's also a recognition that they have no shoreline protection zones whatsoever, and that we're not enforcing that either.
That's the challenge. Otherwise, you wouldn't allow them to replace their seawall, their pool, or do any work in their backyard because the shoreline protection zone would prohibit it. So it just simply recognizes that there are a number of properties built prior to the comp plan enforcement that, for the reality is the shoreline protection zone simply does not exist because it's fully built out prior to the plan's adoption.
And we do enforce the shoreline protection zone for lots of record that were platted prior to 82, so we require a minimum 25-foot SPZ for lots that are an acre or less, and we do enforce that
Where?
throughout the county.
No. In what,
How many
in
acres
what
or less?
chapter?
It should be here in Chapter 8. It's definitely in the LDR.
And in 9.
We even have a handout that we give to residents that walk in, what can I do with this property? And if they're in a, platted lot from the 50s, and they're an acre or less, you have a 25-foot shoreline protection zone that is enforced. So we don't let you build your pool 10 feet away from the seawall, if you will.
Or expand your patio, which is often the
Right.
case. Someone goes to Home Depot and gets a pallet of pavers, and they have to take them out because they're within 25 feet.
Commissioner Vargas?
Okay, so this is going forward, is what I'm understanding, this language here about the 25 feet or 75 feet. Is that correct?
No, that's existing.
It's existing text in the plan. No one's proposing to make any change to this paren 5.
I understand. All right, so I had a constituent that wanted to build a swimming pool. And Martin County went out there. She does have mangrove. And she did not have a seawall. And so she was denied her permit. She had the adequate space. So would that be a case where we could look at this again?
I'm familiar with the property.
You are familiar with the property, okay.
So that's a property that had mangroves along the shoreline, and that's a case where, in addition to a shoreline protection zone, we would have a wetland buffer that would be regulated, but the language is very similar on a lot of record. The wetland buffer for a lot, an acre or less, would be 25 feet. So the problem with that particular resident is they built their house right on the 25-foot line, so they didn't leave themselves any room for a pool. So there was, and we do enforce the shoreline protection zone on these older platted lots, so we had to enforce the shoreline protection zone / wetland buffer, and we can't allow any development in that wetland buffer. The house was built right on the line.
Right, I think that property was built, was it the 80s or 90s? Do you
I believe
recollect?
that's was platted in 79, if I'm not
79
mistaken.
platted. Everybody else had the seawall,
And
except this particular
That's the thing that
property.
happens in subdivisions. All the lots are different, and a lot of the lots that people come in to build, a 79 platted lot, they come in to build it in 2020, and it was never built on, where there might be a reason, because it was, had a lot of mangroves or other issues with the size of the lot, so,
I think, Chairwoman Hurd, you're trying to maintain consistency. Is that your dilemma?
Well, there has to be, and there's also new language that I think creates less clarity.
So I think we're trying to avoid interpretation at the moment of each particular instance. Somebody contacts Martin County, well, okay, this is okay, and that's not okay. Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, rather than the rule is, the rule is.
Well, I think you're correct. The rule is what the rule is, but every situation is not the same. And different properties present different challenges. Some are pre-82 lots of record, post-82 lots of record. Some have regulations on their plat from 1978, some don't. And there are also unique circumstances when extreme erosion occurs.
Yeah.
So it's a dynamic problem that staff deals with.
Yes, I understand about the pre and the post. And then it could be a circumstance where they do have mangroves, or they have erosion of a seawall, or something different.
Commissioner Heatherington.
I definitely see it as a dynamic problem, so I would like some historical edification, because we talk about this lots 1 acre or less, and, some have a 25-foot setback if they were pre-X amount of year. How did we establish the 75-foot protection zone on lots of X, or how do we come up with that number? So what makes that the magic number? I, of course, wasn't here, so I would just love to hear that.
I'll give you a brief history, if I can. The comp plan adopted in April 1st, 1982 said that there will be a 50-foot shoreline protection zone laid down along all the estuarine rivers and water bodies. I think soon after that, they realized they needed to make an exception for a lot of residential lots, a lot of smaller lots that had been created. And so they created and put into the comp plan an exception for lots that existed before April 1st, 1982, and they said that it'll be a 25-foot.
25-foot, okay.
That number has been amended, changed, adjusted. A 10-foot construction setback has been added to that at times. It's gone back and forth over the decades since 1982. In 1998, the Wetlands Land Development Regulation was adopted to implement the plan policies, and the plan was also amended in 1998, I think as a part of an EAR process, to increase that 50-foot shoreline protection zone to 75 feet. And it retained at the same time the reduction down to 25-foot for the residential lots of record that pre-existed April 1, 1982.
So what analysis was like say pre-1982? You said there was obviously a lot of problems and challenges based on the old lots of record. What analysis was used to change the 50 to the 25, or vice versa from the 50 to the 75? It seems like a very arbitrary number. So what was used in order to say this is the right number to make sure that we're protecting our shoreline?
I don't know what data they referred to at that time.
But clearly we must have used data and not just picked a number out of the hat, right? Right?
Well, they could have picked a number.
The number out of the hat.
So maybe there's some data that we need to be looking at for these things. Maybe there's something like, it seems I agree with Commissioner Hurd, it seems kind of inconsistent and sort of arbitrary to me. Like, maybe there's a better way to look at this than just pick a number of 25 to 75 based on your size of your lot and when it was recorded.
I don't know the date.
Commissioner Campy.
Thank you. Some of this I was around for in terms of when it went from 50 to 75, I think it wasn't so much a number being picked out of a hat. I think there was a change in majority, and the number was increased for the sake of increasing it. Because if it's further away from the shoreline, you would assume that it would mean you're more protecting the water because everything is further away. I do remember certain situations, and to Commissioner Vargas's point, you will have a lot of that. Same for Commissioner Capps. You'll have a lot of residents that will reach out to you, having already spoken to staff, feeling that the number is punitive, that it forces them to not be able to build and to utilize the property that they had always anticipated that they would. And they're going to be very frustrated and very angry at our staff. So it's odd to hear that our staff seems to be trying to water this down and weaken it, because the perception from a majority of our land-owning residents that have the terrific benefit of living near the water, that somehow the rules are unfair to them, and that, hey, I've lived somewhere else and it wasn't like this. We bought this property assuming that we can be. I've stood with our staff in many a backyard. I have people that are furious at me to this day because I wasn't somehow able to overrule or just automatically change the rules and the plan and the LDRs and the comp plan. They were so frustrated that the commissioners could not just automatically, and then to Commissioner Vargas's point that some of the neighbors will have something done already and they won't. In Lighthouse Point and in Palm Point, there were several people that had basically landscaped lawns right up to the river's edge, and 2 houses, and these are multi-million-dollar homes. 2 of them, they didn't have the same type of erosion. They allowed, the people they bought the house from, allowed the mangroves to grow very tall and very thick, and they wanted to come in, and they can look right next door at these folks that have a beautiful, unobstructed view of the wide water river, and they have no view. So they said, hey, we want to trim and chop. And so they hired landscapers that did not know what the rules were or didn't want to know what the rules were, and they came in there and chopped it up. Then the DEP gets involved, and they're really challenging. So be prepared, not in a mean way, but be prepared for a lot of constituent calls for people that are going to come and ask you and tell you that they think these rules are too aggressive. I had a gentleman that was stuck in a wheelchair. Like he was able to walk, and then for the rest of his life he was going to be in a wheelchair. And his wife put pavers, as Mr. Donaldson said. In Lighthouse Point, there was a seawall there. Everyone else had it, a dock or something, but he never had it. They had grass that went down. Well, he could no longer get to the seawall, so his wife had a landscaper come and put just 2 rows of 24 by 24 foot pavers so that he could roll his wheelchair back and forth. Imagine us telling him and his wife, sorry, you're not allowed to be on the back half of your property, but I'm in a wheelchair. Sorry. So there are some of these. So with this, I do have a tremendous amount of respect for my colleague. Commissioner Hurd has been here a long time. She's obviously been a champion for keeping these things as rigid and tight as possible, or tighter. And I hear her. This morning in particular, I hear her. But what tips it for me is we have probably 10, 15 different staff professionals involved from many different departments that are as passionate. I believe, Doctor, I believe you're as passionate. I don't think you're less passionate than Commissioner Hurd. And you've brought forward these suggestions, not because you guys felt like, hey, we got nothing better to do, let's bring this forward. You had to. You're saying to me that the language is either neutral or more restrictive or not less, and that we haven't really damaged the plan. You're doing what's appropriate, and the whole collection of you decided with your decades of experience that this is the right thing, and because of that, I would make a motion to continue this until March 25th, because at this particular point, we're just giving out opinions trying to overrule what we have hired these dozens of professionals to give us what they would recommend is the best path forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Vargas.
So I would never recommend somebody to use as a practice of assuming something personally or professionally, or if you purchase a property. In my practice in real estate, I was advised to seek counsel of professionals, the county, and it wasn't always followed. I recollect a client, she wasn't from this country, but I spoke Spanish and it wasn't lost in the translation. She saw the mangroves and she said, "I would like a view." And I said, "But I told you so." And of course, you know what happens. So those are circumstances that are unfortunate. It can come back to professionals that are out in the field also. And I think that we really need to look at this carefully and possibly get some studies from other counties. I mean, we're all in Florida here where a lot of properties are on the water and they have the same access, maybe different insofar as the type of shoreline, and possibly be able to, gird this up a bit. It seems a little loose, and we just want to have uniformity. It makes your job easier, it makes our job easier, and it also gives more information to the prospective constituent who wants to do something to enhance their property.
So I do appreciate everybody calling me doctor, but I'm not. Thank you very much.
Yes, she did.
But that's fine. I'm a professional engineer. I'm a licensed engineer. To your point.
No, let it go.
I know. What was the second meeting that I was?
You wear it
doctor
well.
and
You wear it well.
It's fine. So Commissioner Vargas, I tend to do that. No, but Commissioner Vargas, you're correct. There's actually, University of Central Florida right now is doing a shoreline characterization between Brevard County, Indian River, St. Lucie, and Martin County. They just finished that up. They're actually doing some modeling to see where mangroves are the best place for a living shoreline. So we're kind of waiting that studies, what will come out of that. And as part of our vulnerability assessment and looking at adaptation moving forward, we personally would like to go ahead and do that for the rest of the shoreline because they're concentrating more on the Indian River Lagoon area. But to extend that more into the St. Lucie estuary and our other waterways. So you're correct. And it'd be great information for us to have and back up for a lot of stuff that we already have within our comp plan and LDRs.
I was with you at that conference, and I did bring back some information, so I'm very well aware of that. But I just think that if you have others in this entity that is going to be doing the studies and they can go much more in depth than you can, why not use it? That's what we're there for. And that's what they're there for.
Correct.
You.
Yeah.
All of you.
Thank you.
I have another question, and it's on page 633, number 4. Shoreline hardening may be approved following extreme storm events that damage the estuarine shoreline, and they can be hardened regardless of the presence of a shoreline protection zone or preservation area identified on a site plan or a recorded plat.
I think Commissioner Campy actually was referring to a circumstance that this is applicable to. In 2004, 2005, I don't remember which year it was, we had an extreme storm event that where the wide water of the St. Lucie stripped away about half of a 50-foot shoreline protection zone. DEP, under Governor's emergency declaration, issued permits for shoreline hardening. And people went to work on doing just that. And they now have seawalls and/or riprap sitting right in an area that is platted as a shoreline protection zone. And we have a circumstance where we have our rules, and we have obviously something that the governor's office and the DEP allowed and was done, and we don't have any clear regulation to deal with it or to address it. And this gives us some means of addressing that type of a extreme circumstance.
but it says that you can approve shoreline hardening regardless of the presence of a shoreline protection zone or preservation area identified on a site plan or a recorded plat.
Following an extreme storm event that
And it says May. So again, they'd have to provide backup, and they'd have their damage backup, but then how would they restore it? And of course, our preference would always be, if you could restore it back with a living shoreline, that would be the preference. And I think we do have that that's always the first case.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yeah.
Paul Schilling, Growth Management Director. Just that particular circumstance, as I recall, the hurricane actually devastated the shoreline protection zone. There was no shoreline protection zone, although depicted on the plat. The houses were located, in some cases, pretty close to the actual mean high water line. So the mechanism you see today would provide for those emergency circumstances. We would still go through all the other typical reviews we do, which are, I may add, quite stringent for hardening, and those would be done, but this would be a mechanism to simply shore up a shoreline that had been devastated by a hurricane, in which the county is in a position where it is showing a platted shoreline protection zone of which we have no deviation from.
Commissioner Capps.
Yes, I thought I would just touch on something very basic for anyone who might not understand the issue as well. I got a feeling most people in the room here today understand the whole concept of living shorelines and shoreline protection zones, but in case somebody is watching Channel 20 who doesn't really understand the importance of the issue, a living shoreline is like vegetation and natural conditions along the river bank. And that's where all the critters live. That's where the fish feed, and where all the little crabs are. And when you put in seawalls everywhere, that kind of destroys the living shoreline. And that's what the comp plan is for, and in this particular chapter, and that's what we're trying to achieve to restore the health and to maintain the health of the river.
There's a motion to continue. Is there a second?
Second.
Public comment. Public
Is
comment.
there public comment on this item? Good morning.
Good morning. Carol Ann Leonard, and I've just been listening to what's been said this morning because I didn't see anything on the website when I looked last night. Okay, I remember seeing a 25-foot shoreline protection. That sounds, I don't know, there seems to be some inconsistency. I would say the further back, the better. I am a proponent of living shorelines with rocks, littoral plants, and so on. Mangroves are great. They do a lot more than, they protect from hurricanes. They also do a lot of other things. I don't know if they could be trimmed, if that would be legal. I know they can't be removed. If they could be trimmed, I don't know. Maybe that would help. And then I think any kind of seawall might be possible to be destroyed. And I like the idea that you want to keep it a living shoreline if possible. However, you mentioned something about an engineering report was going to be mandated to replace it in order to decide what could be replaced, and I really don't think that's necessary. And that's about it.
Thank you. Any other public comment? There's a motion and a second to continue the item. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Opposed? That motion passes 4-1 with Hurd dissenting. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and we're going to come back to our preset.
Thank you, members of the board.
Thank you. Good morning. We are resuming with Department 3, which is a Florida East Coast Railroad Quiet Zone update. Mr. Hammond.
Good morning.
Morning.
Matt Hammond. I have the privilege of serving as the Assistant County Engineer. With me here is Mr. George Gavala. George is a railroad safety expert. He's the president of Triad Railroad Consulting. And in his past professional career, he served a better part of a decade as a senior executive with the Federal Rail Administration, specifically on safety initiatives. And while there's a lot of information here and a lot of folks that went into preparing it, I'd be remiss if I didn't specifically mention the efforts of Ms. Jet Martell and Christine Madsen, who were integral in helping prepare this information this morning. Starting with some background, trains have been running through Martin County since 1894, when Henry Flagler extended the FEC Railroad down to what's now West Palm Beach. That rail traffic on this corridor has primarily been freight lines up until September of '23, when Brightline began commercial operations through the county. At that time, Martin County leadership chose to make a strategic pause and wait a year and evaluate the impact of Brightline rail operations through the county. And after a year, evaluate what those quiet zones might look like through the county. And that's what brings us here today, following through on that commitment to look at what quiet zones, how that would impact the county, and what that process looks like. There are 27 crossings on the FEC rail corridor. 17 are under the jurisdiction of Martin County, 5 with our neighbors in the city of Stewart, 2 we share with our neighbors to the north and south, St. Lucie County and Palm Beach County, 2 are under the state of Florida, and 1 is a private crossing. The reason that trains sound horns along the corridor is because of the federal train horn rule, which dictates when, where, how often that horns are blown through the corridor as trains approach crossings. Mr. Gavala here has the depth of experience going back several decades on the history of why that is and what the background on how that transpired.
Good morning.
Railroad have been sounding horns at the trains for well over 100 years. And it was the industry itself that developed this pattern that's used all over the country, 2 long horn sounds, a short and a long, every crossing. But it was no regulations, no federal regulations. Some states had regulations, but mostly the railroads. And in the 1980s, right here on the Florida East Coast, there was an event that basically triggered this entire law that we have now for grade crossings and quiet zones. Because the counties here decided to implement their quiet zones on their own, and there were no regulations to stop them. So at night, it was nighttime quiet zones from, I think, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. And so the Federal Railroad Administration, one of the things they do is they track safety data. They track accident data. And what we found was that over a period of time, once they instituted these nighttime quiet zones, the rate of fatal crossing accidents along that corridor tripled, just went up. After several years, when we noticed the trend didn't change, the FRA stepped in and issued what they call an emergency order. This is beyond regulations. They said something is just so safe, we have to put a stop to it. And they prohibited the whistle bands. And then the rate went back down to what it was before. That also prompted FRA to look at data and say, well, how many quiet zones are out there across the country? Something we never really paid much attention to, never looked at it, and started doing several studies. In some studies, it was 60% increase in accidents. In some cases, it was between 60 and tripling what we saw here. So at that point in time, the FRA went to Congress and said, we think we need to require that trains sound their horns, not just make it an industry standard, make it a law, and prohibit quiet zones. And Congress agreed and showed them the data, and they said, okay, do that. And so every 2 years, whenever there's a new Congress, there's new safety legislation. And they said, FRA, go ahead and do this regulation. So we basically said, you have to sound the train horn everywhere. Well, there was an outcry across the country because there were a lot of communities that no one knew about that had quiet zones for years and wanted to keep them. And so the next Congress, they stepped in and passed another law, said, FRA, come up with a process whereby communities can silence the train horn and come up with some safety standards to do that. And that's where the present law is. This is why this whole process for establishing quiet zones came from that experience. Now, the FRA I was the head of the Office of Safety during this period of time. So all the safety inspectors, all the safety analysts, all the data analysts and the economists who did cost-benefit studies all reported to my office. We were 70% of the entire FRA. So I was involved in the creation of these regulations to a large extent. And so we had a very limited data to work with because there was very few measures that were out there that were designed to compensate for the lack of a train horn. One of them is the 4-quadrant gates, the 4 gates that you see along the corridor here. And we knew that was effective, but we had to figure out how effective. How do you quantify something like that? Well, basically what we did is we looked at one crossing with 4-quadrant gates in North Carolina, observed it for 2 weeks and found out how much observed it for 2 weeks or actually more than 2 weeks before you put the 4 quad gates in, and then a couple weeks after, and said, how much do you see people, how much does it cut down on violations of the crossing? And that's where we got the statistical analysis. And you could say, well, is that really valid? Well, it's all we had to work with at the time. So now, you see 4-quadrant gates here. So basically, the FRA, the regulations, come up with certain safety measures that if a community puts them in place, they're called supplemental safety measures. If you put them, add them to your crossings, it should make them safer. And then we'll explain a little bit next about the process of how you evaluate whether your crossings are safe enough to have a quiet zone. But that's essentially how the whole regulation came about. So what you do is you measure the safety of your crossings before you have the quiet zone. And then you measure it if you put in these safety measures. So if you have 4-quadrant gates, we expect that the accident rate will go down. It'll be a safer crossing. If you have median barriers where you can't cross the road to drive from around the down gate, that should make it safer. There are measures, if you have a one-way street, you change a two-way street to a one-way street and have the gate block the entire road. Well, that's going to be a safer crossing. If you close a crossing, say you've got 10 crossings and you close 2 of them, well, it's going to be safer in the corridor because you have less crossings and less exposure. So basically, the whole process is if you make the entire corridor safer, then you get the safety below a certain, you get the safety above a certain level, a certain threshold, then you'll qualify for the quiet zone. If you get the risk down, the danger down to a certain level, you'll qualify for a quiet zone. And that's how the process works in general. And we can get into the specifics in a bit here.
So moving forward, as part of the federal train horn rule, quiet zones were, at the direction of Congress, written into that rule. And they're a partnership between the public authority and the Federal Railroad Administration, or FRA. And they consist of a section of rail line, at least a half-mile long, with no other crossings within a quarter mile of either side, where train engineers do not routinely sound their horns approaching the crossings. They can still sound their horns for the reasons of emergencies or to comply with other federal regulations, but the routine sounding of horns is stopped through that section. And this is the most technical of the slide, as the federal government likes their acronyms. But as George was alluding to, for a community to qualify for a quiet zone, they have to demonstrate that their quiet zone risk index, which is calculated using a calculator that the FRA provides, is below the risk index with horns or below the nationwide significant risk threshold. And you can do that through one of two ways: supplemental safety measures, which would be the 4-quadrant gate crossings, or gates with medians that extend out, or one-way crossings. But they're very specifically defined measures, safety measures at each crossing. The other way would be alternative safety measures, which are typically a combination of some of those features of the SSMs. In addition to those safety measures that are put in place to reduce your risk score, every crossing within a quiet zone has to meet the basic safety requirements of complying with federal signage and pavement marking requirements, have advanced warning signs, flashers at the crossings, gates, pedestrian warning bells, etc. Which carries us into where are the crossings within the county right now. Under the Brightline settlement agreement, Brightline was under they were required to upgrade all of the 19 crossings that the county either controls or shares with St. Lucie and Palm Beach County. And each of those crossings was improved under that agreement, and those construction of those is complete. And similar upgrades were completed with the other public authorities within the county, Stewart, and the state crossings. And also, while not directly tied to whether or not a community can qualify for a quiet zone, it is an important factor of the safety of a corridor. There were fence improvements that Brightline is required to assist in putting in on the corridor, and our public works team has been coordinating with Brightline on those locations. With those improvements, the 17 Martin County crossings would likely qualify, 12 of them would likely qualify as supplemental safety measures, 4 alternative safety measures. The 2 that we share both have 4-quadrant gates and would qualify as SSMs. And City of Stewart, 2 of them would likely qualify as SSMs. One of the state of Florida's Monterey Road as an ASM, and then the one private crossing has 4-quadrant gates and would qualify as SSMs. One of the other factors in putting in place a quiet zone is if the dimensions of a quiet zone include crossings that cover more than one public agency, all of those public agencies have to approve in writing or agree in writing to put that in place. And going from north to south across the county, that could include up to 5 public agencies with the City of Stewart, St. Lucie County, Palm Beach County, FDOT, and the Florida Department of Environmental Protection at Jonathan Dickinson State Park. For a public authority that wants to put in place a quiet zone, there's 2 routes that they can take. One is a self-designation. In order to qualify for a self-designation, that agency or that public authority has to show that their risk index is below the thresholds, and all of the safety measures that are used qualify for those very specific SSMs or supplemental safety measures. If that's not the case and there are alternative safety measures used, then that public authority has to go the route of a full application to the FRA. The steps on that look like preliminary work of updating traffic counts, updating grade inventory crossings, putting in place the necessary signage, and executing any interlocal agreements that may need to be in place. With that, you file a notice of intent, followed by a 60-day notice period, and then the FRA and FDOT and other agencies, they come out and they do an in-person diagnostic review at each crossing. Once you implement their findings and pass that diagnostic review, then you file a notice of intent, and a quiet zone is established. The full application to the FRA is substantially similar. However, there is the interim step of submitting a very detailed package to the Federal Railroad Administration, and their review and approval can take quite a while. Palm Beach Gardens has to go this route. They submitted in May and have not received any comments back yet.
Wow.
Once a quiet zone is put in place, there are ongoing requirements that the public authority has to maintain, maintaining the required signage and pavement markings, adhering to any of the relevant quiet zone federal regulations. They must ultimately stay below that quiet zone risk threshold. And there's a requirement to affirm in writing every 2.5 to 3 years to the FRA that you are maintaining those and that you intend to keep your quiet zone in place. So, railroad safety and quiet zones, and in particular, is a complex topic, and there's a lot of factors that go into the decision of whether it's right or wrong for one community. Some of those key decision points that are presented here are: what are the public safety impacts? What are the legal impacts of putting up a quiet zone in place? What are the community impacts to the train horns themselves through the community? And then, obviously, what are the costs to put that in place and ongoing? Starting with public safety, in addition to the additional railroad traffic that the Brightline brought, it also brought higher train speeds. The maximum speeds through the county, maximum allowable speeds, range from 25 to 110 miles an hour through the corridor. The actual speeds that the trains may have at any particular location could be less than that, and often is, as they have to slow down to negotiate curves, etc. But the maximum allowable speeds that they may go are shown on this figure here. And with higher speed comes higher risk. Another factor are what's the safety, what's the incident history look like? That strategic pause that the county chose to take for a year allowed to see what the impact is as far as incidents through the corridor. And while a year and a half is not necessarily statistically significant, the number of incidents does provide some pretty good perspective, at least in the interim. In the 9 years before before Brightline operation began, there were 4 incidents through the corridor. One of those was fatal. 3 of those incidents occurred at road crossings, and 2 of them involved a vehicle and 2 involved a pedestrian. In the 18 months or so since Brightline began operation, there's now been 8 incidents. 2 of them have been fatal, 7 at road crossings, 6 involved a vehicle, 2 pedestrian, and now with another rail line running through there, 6 of the 8 have been involved the Brightline and 2 have involved the FEC rail. Through taking a look at this, the incident history as well as the information from the FRA, there were certainly some high-risk crossings that jumped out and going through this analysis. That'd be Jensen Beach Boulevard, Colorado Avenue in downtown Stuart, Monterey, Indian Street, and Cove Road. And those jumped out for a number of reasons. One, their risk index score from the FRA was substantially higher than the majority of the other crossings in the county. And that risk index, what comes into play there are how many accidents have happened in the past, what's the traffic count, how much traffic is going over those crossings, what's the configuration at the crossings. And each of those are for some specific reasons. They're challenging because they have complex configurations. They're crossings that go through or right next to a roundabout, or they're immediately adjacent to an intersection that makes the putting safety measures in place just a lot more challenging. Moving over to community impacts, there's certainly a quality of life impact to the train horns sounding through the community. And the county receives numerous noise complaints through the request for service system, or RFS system, phone calls and emails to staff and elected officials. And quantifying that is a little bit challenging because noise complaints themselves, they're subjective. There's different factors that apply in there, and how they sound, environmental factors, topography, background noise, and then just what's objectionable to me right next to a railroad might be not objectionable or objectionable to somebody who's just down the road or my neighbor next door. But within that corridor and where the train horns are sounded, there's more than 12,000 residential properties, or about 25,000 residents within a half mile of where those zones where horns are sounded, and 27,000 or about 60,000 residents within a mile of those zones. And so certainly an important factor in the decision making is what are the legal impacts, and I'm not going to weigh in on that one here, but our Ms. Elder here has been part of this process. And
Elise Elder, Deputy County Attorney. So the regulations help a little bit with lawsuits against counties or local governments for quiet zones, but they don't guarantee you won't get sued for them. It's based on the facts and circumstances of the case. You can never stop the liability, so there is additional liability with a quiet zone. So for example, if you have safety measures and there's a malfunction and someone can establish that's the local government's fault and their negligence, you would be liable. So there is additional liability for the quiet zones if you do establish them, most likely.
so, and what's right for one community may not necessarily be right for another. But for perspective, the status of where our neighbors to the north and south, where they are and how they've chosen to move forward with quiet zones is up here. Starting from the north, Indian River County has chosen not to pursue quiet zones. St. Lucie County has chosen to pursue a smaller quiet zone, a 3-crossing quiet zone immediately north of our shared county line. City of Stewart is exploring what that looks like for them. Village of Tequesta is pursuing a quiet zone. Town of Jupiter and Palm Beach Gardens have both submitted applications to put in a quiet zone in place. And I can mention that none of the 4 that are currently pursuing a quiet zone have achieved that at this point yet. So that's a lot of information to be able to present and digest and make an informed decision on this topic. There are 3 likely options of how to move forward with a quiet zone through Martin County. The first of which would be no change, maintaining the status quo. That certainly has the lowest risk to public safety and is the safest route to go for the community, but it also has the highest community impact, and for obvious reasons, the lowest cost. And I did put minimal cost instead of zero cost, because there are minor improvements that our traffic operations team are evaluating and pursuing, regardless of the policy direction that the board chooses to make each of the crossings as safe as they can be. A second option would be to move forward with a county-wide quiet zone. The improvements that Brightline has put in place are the bare minimum that, at least running through the numbers in the calculator, that would be required in order to do this. It comes with the highest risk to public safety. A full application to the FRA would be required in order to go that route. And coordination with all 5 of the other public authorities, and their agreement and approval would be needed in order to do that. There are significant recommended improvements that would be recommended, specifically zoning in on those high-risk crossings and how to move forward with make those the safest they can be given the challenges that they have. A third potential option is choosing a smaller areas to put in a quiet zone in place. One of those could be a Jensen Beach option. What's shown here would be the northern 2 crossings of Northeast County Line Road and Northeast Skyline Drive. Both of those have the supplemental safety measures in place that the county could go the self-designation route if that was the policy direction chosen. An interlocal agreement and an approval from St. Lucie County would be needed there. The train speeds through that corridor are on the higher end. Coming from the north to the south, the Brightline trains can exceed or go up to 100 miles an hour. And it does, and for the reasons that were mentioned about Jensen Beach Boulevard, it does exclude Jensen Beach Boulevard for the incident history that's there and the the safety considerations at that. Another potential option would be up to 5 crossings through the Hope Sound corridor. That's running from southeast Dixie down to southeast Gleason. Again, each of those have the supplemental safety measures in place that should that direction be chosen, that self-designation route with the FRA could be used. Those are all county crossings. There would be no coordination with other public agencies in order to do that. And again, this is also a high-speed crossing with train speeds from 90 to 110 miles an hour. So with that, what's being requested is policy direction from the board on how the board wishes to pursue, whether it's one of the 3 options that were presented, a combination, or some other direction. And with that, Mr.
Can you go back one slide again? Sorry.
Certainly.
No, the other way, the one before the end, that one.
Yes.
Commissioner Heatherington.
I have a couple questions, and we had an opportunity to meet a few weeks ago, but just kind of elaborating on our conversation and your presentation for the quiet zones. For my understanding, if you apply, it says countywide 24-hour versus nighttime. It's my understanding that we can apply for just 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. If you apply for it, it applies to the entire 24-hour period. Is that?
So there are two time periods that can be chosen for a quiet zone. One is a 24-hour, so 24/7, that routine sounding of horns would be prohibited. Or the second option is a nighttime, specifically from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m.
But the application process is the same
It is.
for either?
Correct.
Okay. So it makes more sense to apply for the 24-hour. So that's for countywide. And then you just referenced at the end of your presentation 2 crossings in Jensen, it looks like 5 in Hope Sound that we could self-designate versus do the full application process. Explain that a little more.
Right. So the two routes that a public authority can take to put a quiet zone in place, what I refer to as the self-designation route, does not require an application to the FRA, but there are very specific requirements to qualify for that route. All of the safety measures that are put in place have to fit within one of those supplemental safety measures. So gates at all 4 quadrants, or dual gates with the medians of appropriate length and height. In addition to your risk, showing that your risk index is lower than the thresholds that
Which
FRA.
would apply for the whole corridor, right? The risk index is based on the entire corridor, or those 2 separate?
Would apply to the corridor that you're applying for.
So the entire county?
Or
The risk index is just for crossing by crossing?
For the length of the zone you're applying for.
Okay, so let's say the 5 crossings. We'll take Hope Sound as an example. That has its own risk index.
it is, it's the risk index that's for each of the crossings averaged together. So if, for that example of the 5 crossings in Hope Sound, it would be the risk index calculated by the FRA averaged for each of the crossings averaged.
Over those 5 crossings?
Over the 5
You're not
crossings.
averaging it, say, with Confusion Corner?
Correct.
Okay, so if we want to move forward with, just say those 2 segments, then we could self-designate, not have to go through the full application process, as long as those 5 crossing and those 2 crossings to the north meet the SSM or the ASM certain safety standards? Is that what I'm understanding?
That's correct. So the SSMs are the only safety measures that are allowed if you self-designate. And then when you go through that process, there's the diagnostic review where FRA staff, FDOT staff come out and they review each of those crossings, the safety measures in place. And then they either approve or provide feedback on what in addition needs to be implemented in order for them to comply.
do we know kind of where we are with how close? Because a lot of those, it seems like, especially down south, the 5 crossings have been upgraded. Are we pretty close to that meeting that SSM requirement?
So we did meet informally. We met with the FRA and FDOT staff and visited the crossings and received preliminary feedback. It was informal. It was not official, and the feedback that we received on each of those was the basic requirements of updating the signage to the current federal standards that are in place right now.
Okay.
So street signs, and some pavement markings, essentially.
Okay, so not major reconfiguration of intersections and things like that. We're pretty close to meeting that.
That's correct.
Okay, for those 2, I'm just speaking of the 5 in Hobe Sound and the 2. And then let's move more to the middle, which is probably also particularly in my district of concern. And I think all of this is sort of a quality of life issue too. So if we talk about the ones that you haven't referenced, the 5 and the 2, which I'm wholly in favor of supporting moving forward with the 5 crossings in Hobe Sound and 2 to the north. I prefer to do countywide, but I see some obstacles. So you talked about 5 agencies that we would have to collaborate with for those others. Can you identify those 5 agencies? You maybe did on a slide somewhere.
Right. So those would be St. Lucie County, the City of Stuart, Florida Department of Transportation, and would be Monterey Road, Florida Department of Environmental Protection at Jonathan Dickinson State Park, and then Palm Beach County for the Southeast County Line Road crossing. Those would be the 5 agencies that, and specifically not mentioned here, and for a reason, is the one private crossing. Private crossings are not considered in this analysis or how the FRA considers whether or not a quiet zone can go in place.
Okay, so let me address specifically the couple that I can think of in my district that really impact residents, which will be in the downtown area and down Dixie Highway. So I can think of at least 4 or 5 crossings. One would be Confusion Corner, and then what's Haney Circle? Joan Jefferson. And then there's one down sort of at Martin Luther King and Dixie. So to include those, we would probably need to do the county-wide, but we certainly wouldn't need collaboration for St. Lucie County, right? But we would need collaboration with the City of Stuart, the DOT, and the DEP. So you don't include those?
Depending on the extent of it. So Monterey Road would be the FDOT, would need to agree to if it included Monterey Road. And then the city of, as you move north from there, you would need to include the City of Stuart as you get from Florida and MLK through downtown Stuart, and Fern would be the last City of Stuart crossing.
Okay, so this corridor that I'm referencing, say from Monterey to Martin Luther, Confusion, and Haney, does that have the upgrades that we spoke of on the 5 crossings and the 2 crossings, the upgraded that would appeal for the SSM, and can that be self
Right. So,
designated?
Yep. So, looking specifically at the the 5 City of Stuart, preliminary evaluation of those, two would have a good chance of qualifying as the safety measures in place qualifying as the SSMs or supplemental safety measures, and that would be Florida and Martin Luther King. The balance of the City of Stuart's, the current measures that are in place would not qualify for in any of the, it does not appear that they would qualify for any of the credits that would be in place for SSMs or ASMs as they currently stand.
And that's the City of Stuart's responsibility to having those appropriate safety requirements in place to meet that SSM standard? It's not the counties, right?
Most likely, depending on how it was chosen to move forward, if that was the case. But those are the City of Stuart's roadways. They're under their responsibility to maintain.
Do we have information as to if, say that this board decided to go the whole route, if those particular crossings would qualify? Do we know?
They would need upgrades prior
need
to,
upgrades.
prior to any application or to be included in, even in a countywide, as I understand it.
Have we had conversations with the city of Stewart to get their, to see when they're planning on doing these safety upgrades?
No, we have not.
So then we would, in order to include the whole, then we would need to collaborate, because if all of these are necessary, we would need the city of Stewart to collaborate on upgrading, doing the safety enhancements on those in order to provide, to apply for the quiet zones in those areas. Is that
Yes,
correct?
that's correct.
So until we are aware of when and they're going to do this, the safety upgrades and how they're going to collaborate, we couldn't apply for those particular crossings.
That's correct. We would need the city of Stewart, both commitment and schedule to include those crossings and an agreement between the county and the city of Stewart to actually jointly participate in the quiet zone process.
Okay, so I don't see us moving forward for the whole countywide today, but could we bring this to the city of Stewart and ask on when they will be doing the safety upgrades and as to their willingness to collaborate on quiet zones within that area?
At the direction of the board.
Okay, so then I'll just summarize my feeling on your presentation, that I think the 5 and certainly the 5 crossings in Hope Sound and the 2 in Jensen makes sense, probably for the 24-hour period. I've ridden Brightline a handful of times down to Miami Heat game, and it's amazing that they don't blow the horn one time from the Palm Beach station to Miami. And it seems, so they must have a lot of safety enhancements. So I would also ask, particularly because these areas impact, my central district residents, and I'm sure some of them would eventually like a quiet zone, that we reach out to the city of Stewart and ask them to, what their timetable is for upgrading these crossings to qualify for the quiet zones, and their willingness to collaborate in the future for doing a full county. But I think we should move ahead with what we can do now, which is those particular areas that seem easy to implement. That's all.
Commissioner Capps.
I'd like to begin by looking at page 3503, which is Public Safety Impacts 10-Year Incident History. And we have already had 3 fatalities in Martin County with trains, and we've had 12 incidents. I also Googled a little while back Brightline collisions in Florida, and it said there have been 200 incidents and 100 fatalities. So that's where I would like to begin. And then I want to consider page 3506, legal impacts. Our Assistant County Attorney just said that there is additional liability that could be attached to the county by having quiet zones. I think we would be crazy to engage in an action that could put us at legal risk. The third thing I want to look at is page 3507, status of neighboring public authorities. And one thing I thought was really interesting in my discussions with staff is what Indian River County decided to do. They decided not to pursue quiet zones at all. And what I heard was that there are 2 firefighters, and 1 police officer on the Board of County Commissioners in Indian River County. And they said having quiet zones is unsafe. And I think we ought to really pay attention to that. I would also refer to what one of our public speakers just said about Sheriff William Snyder, our former sheriff, who I greatly respect. He had real concerns about quiet zones as well. And then I want to talk about my personal experience. I live in Hobe Sound, just 5 houses away from the railroad tracks. We hear the trains all day and all night. There's an item on my wife's piano that rattles when the freight trains come through. And so we're very aware of train noise and are very affected by it. It's just part of life when you live in Hobe Sound. I live on the east side of the tracks, and I have a business on the west side of the tracks. So I'm back and forth across those crossings all day, every day. I have 3 adult children who live on the west side of the tracks, who drive over to the east side of the tracks to see their mom and me very frequently. My mother lives in South Stewart on the west side of the tracks, and she comes to see us often and has to cross those tracks. And she's 85 and she still drives. The sense that I have about the crossings in Hobe Sound is they're not real safe. It would be very easy to get confused for drivers, particularly people who are not from our area. And it would be very easy to find yourself on the tracks when the train is coming. Just the other day, I was going north on Dixie Highway, and I have a friend who has a tree business. And I looked to the right at the Petway crossing, and his truck was he was proceeding west, and his truck was on the west side of the tracks, and his big, heavy steel trailer was sitting right on top of the tracks. And he was sitting there at the red light, very unsafe. If a train would have been coming, it would have slammed right into that heavy steel trailer. So I believe the trains are, especially the Brightline trains, are fast and they're very quiet. And I've noticed that I wouldn't want anything on my conscience if another incident happened. Sadly, it's probably just a matter of time before we have another incident and perhaps another fatality in Martin County. They're happening all up and down the east coast of Florida. And I have a lot of friends in Hobe Sound, and this is the area of the county that would be the most dramatically affected, with 5 crossings down there that are being talked about for quiet zones, and I am very much opposed. And I would make a motion that we not have any quiet zones in Martin County.
Commissioner Vargas.
These trains go way too fast, and we can see that here, up to 110 miles per hour. I think our present sheriff has said that they need to slow down. As our county attorney has said, our assistant county attorney, there's an additional liability for quiet zones. Why would we put ourselves in that position? We in Jensen Beach are looking at safety measures, and I think that Mr. Gorton can speak to that. Some of those that we're implementing just to protect our citizens. We should in no way consider quiet zones until we've implemented safety measures, especially at all the crossings that have the highest incidence in this county. And I made a mention of that during commissioner comments at the beginning of this board meeting. The other thing I want to say is that, and I'll follow everything that Commissioner Capps said, I won't reiterate that, but I'm in total agreement with him. I just have one question. If, and it's a big if we're ever to consider quiet zones, the costs are $40,000 to $140,000. Is there a grant for that?
So on the, excuse me, on the federal level, there are grants available for safety requirements. In general, there are not grants available for quiet zone specific safety improvements in general.
Yeah, I was just in Washington DC, and I spoke with the representatives for the Railroad Association, and they said there's no money whatsoever, believe it or not. Now, I will tell you my own experience. I was crossing Joan Jefferson, and I was going over the railroad tracks at that point, in a roundabout, and the arms were down, train passed, started to proceed forward. The arm came down almost on my vehicle. And of course, it was a little panicky because, do I back up? Do I go forward? What do I do? And then they popped back up again. It was quite confusing, but, looked left, looked right. And if it had been a quiet zone, I'm not really certain what would have happened. I was not the driver. Somebody was more experienced, but if I were the driver, I don't know. So this should not be considered at all in our county at this point. We need to implement the safety measures first and then do another study within Martin County before we even consider this. I don't live near the railroad tracks, but I do hear the trains and I do hear the whistle. And I will say, in downtown Stewart, I heard that train whistle during my campaign right outside the elections office. You knew they were coming. It's amazing I haven't lost my hearing. But anyway, having said that, they go too fast. They do have loud whistles. They're there for a reason. I think the gentleman referred to that. Every time Congress changes, they want to put their fingerprints on something new. We're trying to save lives, and we're trying to have a safe community. That's what I have to say.
Would you like to second the motion?
And what's our motion?
That we not have any quiet zones in Martin County.
Emphatic yes.
Commissioner Campy.
Well, the presentation has taken some interesting turns. It really boils down to, and I appreciate both of you, Matt and Mr. Cavella, appreciate it. Because everyone that's not involved professionally, it's just a personal opinion. You're bringing a lot of experience, decades of experience, and professional opinions, which we as the decision makers have to rely on. From the moment that the train was even discussed, there was talk of quiet zones. I'm fortunate enough in districts at least to be in Palm City. We don't have any train crossings in Palm City. But that being said, I hear this quite often from constituents about when are you going to have the quiet zones? What about the quiet zones? Why do they have to blow the horns? My wife grew up with her home right next to a train tracks and a train station. And I remember the windows rattling and the whole thing. It was a diesel train, but same kind of, concern about being next to the train. Gentleman came forward this morning, made a pretty compelling argument, and he echoes what I have heard from lots of people. So what ends up happening is it comes down to a sort of a quality of life issue. Nobody wants to hear the siren, the horns, to a safety issue. Now, you would assume I was here when we negotiated the settlement with Brightline. It was something that was going to necessarily happen. The fight back in the day, and you gentlemen know it, but for the folks that might be new to this area, the fight back in the day was to try to stop the train from coming at all, which for the most part, there was a very valiant push of grassroots effort here in the county, but it was never not going to happen. If you're trying to get from Miami and Fort Lauderdale and Palm Beach to Orlando, you have to cross through here. I've had people say to me, well, why did the county government at the time or the city government allow them to put the tracks through the downtown city of Stewart? Which of course is not the case, because when did Flagler bring the train down south? In the 1800s? The cities grew up on both sides of the train. It's not that the train bisected the cities. So when people say, well, we don't want it, the train, maybe not the Bright Line, but the train tracks and the system were here first. Another thing that I was very surprised by when I learned it is that the train tracks are not necessarily crossing over county roads. County roads are crossing over the train tracks. And I'm sure we can ask Mr. Donaldson or Mr. Gordon, we pay a fee to the train system for the privilege of having our roads go over their train tracks. So it's a different set of circumstances that most people, logically, you wouldn't think it like that. So during your presentation, I was surprised by the fact that the quiet zones make it more dangerous. I've been frustrated every time I read an article or see a news report about someone being on the train tracks and being either hit personally, physically, or their vehicles by the train. And I say almost sarcastically that I have a guaranteed way for you not to get hit by the train. Do not be on the tracks. Mrs. Vargas's point about sometimes you're crossing, I'm very cautious when I cross to come here in the morning on Indian Street. There's school buses that are returning to the school district depot. And I know that school buses will make a full stop, put their flashes on. The driver is responsible prior to getting onto the tracks to open the door and look and listen. So you're smart not to be behind the school buses because they're going to all stack up. So when you come, but I'm also very careful when you hear these stories that if I can't clear to the other side of the tracks, I don't mean just over the tracks, I mean past the bars coming on the other side. If I don't have tremendous amount of space, I'm not going. Cars are beeping their horn behind me, I don't care. So here's what I'd like to see. I mean, I'm very interested to hear Commissioner Capps. That's about as firm a conversation in his short term as a commissioner that I've heard him make. That's as emphatic as I've heard him be. So I take that into consideration. I want to support his very strong opinion. But I also hear what Commissioner Hetherington has said, and like I said, I hear this. I mean, I live in Palm City, and on a night when the wind is, we can hear the whistle, and I'm on the other side of the river. So I can imagine if you live close to the train tracks, what it must be like. So I was hoping that we were going to do sort of a partial kind of a thing, and maybe we will, maybe we won't. But what I would like to see based on what we're hearing today is at least a further consideration into the future, because I wanted to see a system-wide chart, north to south of our county. When you go, can you go back to the statistics? That one. That's pretty compelling and damning, and like you said, we hear it on the news and read it in the paper. But what I would like to see is where you could say, okay, where did the accident take place, at what crossing, or was it at a crossing? Because some people cross not at the crossings, they're crossing out of the woods and crossing over the tracks not near an actual crossing. When? I need to know the date and the time. Because if they were all stacked to the beginning of the system people, I still don't understand what an 80-mile-an-hour train is. If you grew up in a town that had a diesel train, you could hear it coming. There's also something about, like if you're looking at something that's coming towards you, it's hard to judge, I forget what that's called, spatial something. You can't tell the speed of something if you're looking at it as it's coming towards you. For the people that stand on the tracks and say, oh, I see the train down there, I can cross ahead of time. I'd also like to know the type of accident based on station. So for instance, at Indian Street, is that where the pedestrians were hit because there are more pedestrians there, or were they the cars? I would also like to know what were the medical outcomes of where those accidents took place. Like, are all the fatalities in Jensen? Are all the fatalities at Confusion Corner? Are the serious injuries, where were they? Because then that would give us a baseline to say, okay, this is what we're looking at. And if you're looking at a timeline, you'd say, okay, all of the accidents, the 8 that happened since September of 2023, they all happened within the first 10 months, and we haven't had anything happen in the last 18. Or do we see that most of them are happening at a specific crossing? We don't know that. And so then I was thinking self-designation, if we go that route, which it seems like we might not ever get there. But if we were, it would have been self-designation over the FRA application, because when people hear that we're discussing this, they would assume that we would be having some kind of a resolution in the next couple of months. You're talking at the fastest, if everyone was on board, a year. So a year more of the sounds. I would have done nighttime from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. because obviously that's the point where people are trying to be at home, trying to be asleep. And I would have leaned in on that. In terms of safety and like people getting hit by the train more in Florida than they do anywhere else, Florida has the sad title of being the most dangerous state for bicyclists. It's the most dangerous state for motorcyclists. It's in the top 10 for cars. The only ones that we are not in the top 10 for is truckers and boating. But all the rest of it, Florida is notorious for having the worst drivers. Stop signs are suggestive, red lights are suggestive, speed limits are suggestive. Our biggest issue, at least mine, the biggest dealing as a commissioner that I have is traffic safety. And then you layer in the train. So I'm interested to hear how the vote would go. I would be a little more interested in some more information. But that being said, if the board is passionate, and these are the folks that represent the train crossing areas, I don't. I do holistically, but I don't in my district. So that's my points.
Commissioner Vargas.
Well, we happen to have a chart that lists the crossings, the type of incidents, fatalities, none, the train that caused the incident, the date and the time. That already exists. It's just a matter of requesting that information. There is, I believe, and I will double check, or you can, I think with the Bright Line, they have many more incidents than the previous, the East Coast Railroad. Am I correct? He says yes. He's shaking his head yes.
You've got so many more trains with Brightline
Right.
than you had with the Florida East Coast.
That's correct.
And they are higher speed, yes.
Terrifically higher speed. And we do have to consider our safety. I gave you an incident, and Commissioner Capps also gave you an incident too, of somebody he knew. And it's just a matter of time when there's more gravity for this. We should not even be discussing this at this moment. We haven't implemented the safety measures. And we have quite a few that we've already suggested, that we've already done a traffic study on, that we're in the process of doing a study on with the department head who is here, Mr. Gorton, to make this a reality for our citizens. And then and only then can we look back, actually see if there's a historical that warrants any further discussion.
We have 2 requests to speak from the public. Sharon McGinnis will be followed by Len Susi. Morning.
Good morning, thank you. So first comment I'd like to make is that everyone is aware that a train is a public nuisance. You buy near a train, you live near a train, you must accept a public nuisance. The fact that we have, when you start at Dixie Highway South, when it comes into Hope Sound, and you travel all the way to Jensen Beach Boulevard, Dixie Highway, A1A, Jimmy Buffett Boulevard, whatever you want to call it, it actually mirrors directly with the railroad track. There is no opportunity, and I will say this about Mr. Campy, there is no opportunity for you to even attempt to proceed across the railroad tracks from the east to the west without knowing that you can proceed and clear the intersection. And any discussion of having quiet zones is a waste of our taxpayer dollars. There are, what we should be spending our taxpayer dollars on is to put signs on the east side of a railroad where every crossing is by Dixie Highway with a large sign that blinks and says, "You must stop here at a red light. There is no turn on red." Because anybody who finds themselves parked on a railroad track when they cannot proceed or clear it, you have to wonder about their, I don't care what state they come from, and I don't care if they deal with Brightline, you have to wonder about their mental acuity, okay? To ever stop on a railroad track is to commit suicide. I don't care what a person decides or thinks they decide, and having quiet zones in the middle of the night, yes, it makes it easier, but I can tell you this, people who go to sleep, they get used to things. They get used to the train noises, they get used to foghorns, they get used to boats. The repetitive noises that interrupt that are in your sleep are really not a big issue. And I will say that if I would be very disappointed in Martin County and protecting my taxpayer dollars if they are to even consider a quiet zone. And they need to put those signs up to keep people off the tracks, especially in Hope Sound. My gosh, you have 3 feet.
Ma'am, your time is up.
So please, please, do not carry this discussion any further. Do not spend any money on budgets or reviews or anything. Quiet zones never happen. People understand trains are a nuisance. They make a noise. It's for a purpose. It's for a reason, right? And you need to put instructions.
Ma'am, your time is up. Thank you.
Sorry, time's up?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear you.
Sorry.
I thought you were supposed to be a bell.
He was your bell today.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Len Susi is next. If anyone else would like to address us, please fill out a request to speak form.
There's your boy, Len Susi.
Len Susi, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. I've been, over the last 20 years, been here many times on environmental issues, on growth management issues, on development issues, and I've been in different sides of this issue of growth management, of economic development throughout my career. And I'm here to compliment you on the thoughtfulness with which you have proceeded on all of the issues of the last 20 years. The staff you have has been outstanding, and I just can't be more pleased. Whatever decision you come to is a good decision because it's representing what the people believe and what they think, and you should be very proud of the staff that you have.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second on the floor. I am going to be supporting that vigorously. Quiet zones are dangerous. And these trains are going so fast through our community. There's so many crossings. The thought that there might not be additional safety is appalling. So I will happily support your motion to deny the request for quiet zones. There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. We will now, I don't think we have enough time to take up the next comp plan amendment, so we'll take a break and come back at 1:30. Does that suit y'all? Okay.